Hello YouTube, this is Mike. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit again about what it's like to be on the other side of when you're being gaslit by your cluster B partner. If you're new to this channel is devoted to non-cluster Bs who have been in a romantic relationship or are currently in a romantic relationship with somebody who has toxic borderline personality disorder. By that I mean undiagnosed, untreated, and or somebody who is not yet able to completely manage their symptoms. If you are watching this video and you are borderline, the best way to get the best out of this channel is to listen so you can understand what it's like for the rest of us. I am not a borderline, I am not a therapist, and I'm mostly here to help people who have been in the same position as I was in recover from the pain and the trauma of having been in a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist. So having said that, if you are borderline and you get along great with your partners and you're able to work out problems, then this video and this channel is not about you. If you are a partner, a significant other of a borderline and you're getting along great with them and you don't have any problems and you work things out, then this isn't about you. So don't send me nasty messages telling me how I'm creating stigma, because that's not what I'm doing. I actually go to great lengths defending borderlines against the stigma that they're these evil geniuses that are out to destroy you. And it's very important, if you want to recover from having been in one of these toxic relationships, you have to understand that people with borderline personality disorder have a mental illness. And if they don't have a mental illness, they're not borderline. We're going to discuss that today. And for borderlines, you need to understand there is a difference. I've been on this planet almost 60 years. And I can promise you there is a difference between being in a dysfunctional, bad relationship and being with a borderline. Whole different animal. Whole different level of pain that happens as a result of that. Now, if you're able to hear that without taking it personally and without getting your feelings hurt and without getting angry, then maybe this will be helpful for you. It was very helpful for me to come to the realization that my now ex-girlfriend, over a year ago now, that she actually had a mental illness. She wasn't a horrible person. She wasn't trying to do many of the things that she did, and she wasn't even aware of a lot of the things that she did. So I don't blame her for that. In fact, I have nothing but love and compassion, and at the same time hope I never ever encounter her again for both of our health. So I want to look at some comments that were left. Sometimes borderlines come onto my channel and sometimes they leave me really great comments. These are borderlines who have been in therapy for a long time, and they help to confirm some of my intuitions about what I think is happening on the other side, what their thought process is, and sometimes they correct me on a few things, and sometimes we have some disagreements. And sometimes people with less therapy behind them come and leave comments. So bear in mind, if you leave a comment on my channel, you're leaving it for the whole world to see. And so if I decide to talk about it, by the way, am I even on the right channel here? I don't even know what's going on. Hang on one second here. I'm worried that I'm broadcasting to the wrong channel. Okay, now I'm on the right channel. All right, whatever the heck I was saying, just remember that. All right, so I want to look at the comments here. Let's see, what? Oh, that's why. All right. I'm not managing my open browser windows very well. All right, so let me go take a look at the comments here. All right. So, one of the comments I got was from somebody who is a borderline, I believe. Yes, is a borderline. And this was in response to my video, How Codependents Use Borderlines. And the short story of that is that part of what I do in this channel is I want to help people who have been in relationships with borderlines understand that they are not helpless victims. That yes, trying to go and wrestle a cobra is going to get you bit. So it's not that you haven't been damaged in ways that don't follow the normal rational rules of relationships. It's also that if you have been with a borderline, you chose to be there. And what's important is to understand why you were attracted to them and what kept you in the relationship. We could spend all day talking about all the things that they do wrong, and we do that here on this channel, but only so that you can identify and understand that yes, what was happening to you was not rational. It didn't make sense. You're not crazy. There's something irrational and not normal that's going on, and that feeling of not knowing what's real and what's not, your confusion, the cognitive dissonance, and the continuing to go back into something that part of you knows is not going to work. That's really the only reason to start pointing fingers at what they do. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to point at some fingers at what they do, so that you can better identify what is happening to you, what has happened to you, so that you can separate and heal. Because as I say in my videos, unless you find a borderline that's been in therapy for 10 plus years and has proven to you that they're perfectly capable of managing their symptoms and you can have a healthy relationship with them. If that's not the case, if they are BPD, there's only one solution, and that's get out. And don't haggle about it. Tell them, as kindly as you can, that this is a harmful, toxic relationship for me. I need to leave. I think you should look into getting help for borderline personality disorder. And then you get out. You block your phone, you block your email, you block your social media, your Facebook, you change your phone number if you have to, you move if you have to, you get the hell out and do not give them access to you. And that is first and foremost for your health, because you're going to need to heal. But secondly, it's also because that's the kindest thing you can do for them. Now, if you're borderline and you don't like hearing that, maybe you're going to relate to what this person says here. So again, as I said, if you leave a comment on my channel, bear in mind the whole world sees it anyway. So I'm not trying to point you out and rake you over the coals. I want to, the thing about leaving comments is people leave comments and then run away, and they get to have all of this control over what they say. And there's nobody there to have a discussion with. And that's part of the problem. Part of the problem when you're dating a borderline is that you have two people with two completely different realities. And that makes you feel totally effing crazy. So in this video where I said how codependents use borderlines in romantic relationships, again pointing out that codependents also have to dance. It takes two to tango, and that you're not a victim. And I went, and I'm pretty harsh with codependents, saying that actually codependents seek out borderlines for very narcissistic reasons. And it's really important if you're going to heal that you have to acknowledge your own narcissism. Bear in mind there's narcissistic personality disorder, but that's not what I'm talking about. People throw around the word you're a narcissist far too easily, but the truth is that everybody has narcissism. It's not unique to NPDs. So codependents have their own malignant narcissism that drives them to seek out people in cluster B relationships. We won't talk about that today. So she says, by codependent, do you mean narcissist? This is the comment. That's an understandable question, but it shows that she, like many people, does not understand what codependence is. She's going to even say later on that she shows that she doesn't understand what codependence is. But I'll have to say that most people don't. Most people, especially people who aren't in some kind of recovery or therapy for codependence, do not know what the word means. They get caught up in the word dependent. And that's, I mean, we should call it something else. I don't know what word we should come up with. I'd like to make up one that works better. But if you've been in a relationship or are in a relationship with a borderline and you've been in that relationship for, and you've survived more than 1 or 2 splits, you are by definition a codependent. A codependent dynamic means that one person, if not both, but one person is taking on extra responsibility to hold the relationship together because of somebody else's dysfunction. And even if a borderline doesn't admit to being borderline, they're going to tell you that they have all these other problems and it's your job to help them and fix them. And that right there creates codependency. So she says, by codependent, you mean narcissists, meaning that she's picking up that I'm talking that codependents are very narcissistic. And she's going to go in and she doesn't realize it. She doesn't realize it, but she's going to try and gaslight us into saying, the argument that she's going to try and make is that, yes, technically she's a borderline, but I'm really no different than anybody else, and this is really your problem. She doesn't come out and say that, but that's what she's going to be trying to say, and she's going to be doing it in a very subtle way, but you know me, I can sniff it out. She's trying to gaslight me. Because the bottom line is, there's something that I've been saying about dating a borderline, probably along the lines of you can't make it work, you cannot have a successful relationship with a borderline. You will have your ass handed to you. You will feel destroyed, completely, horrifically messed up. They have a mental illness, etc., etc. She probably didn't like something about that and does make the argument that she's basically no different than anybody else, therefore you can have a relationship with her. My take on that is that I'm not sure this person is currently in therapy. I think she's been in enough therapy to be diagnosed and has accepted that diagnosis, so she must know that there's something different about her. And she probably is, like I said, probably not in therapy right now, and I'm going to be making the argument that she's not aware of the depth of the effects of her symptoms. And this is really the problem. When you're trying to tell a borderline how damaging they are to you, then it gets into this discussion about, why are you saying such horrible things about me? I'm now talking like the borderline. Why are you saying such horrible things about me? And what's with all this stigma? And that's your problem. And these could be reasonable retorts under normal conditions. So when a borderline tries to paint the relationship as the relationship is normal, you're the one that's overreacting. That's when you start losing your mind. Because it's like you're standing there and somebody's stabbing you with a knife and you're saying that really hurts. And the person is saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm barely touching you. If you're bleeding, that's your problem. And they believe that and they don't see what's going on. So I'm going to make the argument here that this person is going to try and do that without realizing it. So she says, I also want to mention that there are different types of borderlines. Some do not fit the description you are speaking of, and not all will be narcissistic. Some are very empathic and don't feel empty and even know who they are. That's why no 2 people with borderline will look alike. While one may be a cheater, compulsive liar, drug addict, etc., another person will be opposite, loving, kind, etc. What I am saying is it really depends on the person, their traits and personal issues, which differ for everyone. Sorry, your experience with borderlines was that, but it's not the face for all. So she's making the argument that she's a borderline, but she doesn't do those things, that whatever I was describing. She says, some do not fit the description you're speaking of. So let me be clear about what I'm speaking of. When I say borderline, somebody who has borderline personality disorder, I'm talking about all the different variations of it. Because she's right that some borderlines are, they're very destructive. They yell and scream and throw things. Some of them In fact, it's very common for them to do all kinds of things like cheat on you, uh, steal your money, destroy your reputation, do really horrible, say really horrible, mean things, do really horrible, mean things, disappear for weeks or months at a time, all that kind of stuff. And some of them are quiet borderlines, which means that they go inward and they don't rage externally, but they'll hold themselves up in their house for a week at a time, or they won't get out of bed, or they'll give you the silent treatment, or isolate, something like that. But what all of them have in common is that they all split, which means that internally, their internal experiences, they either love you or they hate you. You're the best or the worst. And it's not a question of if that might happen, it will happen. It does happen. And I've talked a lot about what that means. For those of us who are on the other side, it's really important to understand what that means, what's really going on with them. So that we don't simply judge them by their external behavior and put stigma on them that they don't deserve. However, even though they're not horrible people, meaning inside, if you were to go inside and live in their skin, you would actually feel that can be very loving people if they're just straight borderlines. But what borderlines can't see and probably don't want to see, for all kinds of understandable reasons, is they don't want to see how horrifically damaging their mental illness is on other people. And so then they're gaslighting themselves as well as you, and they don't even know they do it a lot of times. So she's saying that not all of them will be narcissistic. All right, so this shows that she doesn't understand what borderline personality disorder is. Borderline personality disorder is a form of malignant narcissism. It's, as Sam Vaknin describes it, which I agree with, it's failed narcissism. So a narcissist and a borderline are created under the exact same conditions. Whatever abandonment and neglect that happened as an infant was so horrific. And by the way, in my book, neglect of an infant is the worst, most destructive, most horrific form of abuse. Not that there has to be a competition, but if I had to pick one, it would be it. Literally, infants literally die from it. Literally. So if you have an infant that gets neglected to that point, but they don't die, they become a narcissist. So, people with narcissistic personality disorder, every single one of them suffered horrifically as a child. There may be other things involved, who knows, but that is pretty generally accepted as being the common cause of it. So the difference between a borderline and a narcissist is the way that they respond to that trauma. So the narcissist creates a firewall false personality of being perfect. Everything about them is perfect, and they can do no wrong, and you're there to serve them, and they show no empathy. They're psychopathic. So that's that's a defense mechanism against their reality, which if they were to feel would kill them. The horror of it would kill them. And that is that they are empty, they have no identity, there's this huge giant black hole inside of them. And so in order just to survive, at a very early age, they created this firewall personality of perfection. And it's very sad when again, I recommend people go and listen to Sam Vaknin talk about what it's like to be a narcissist. So the borderline is a failed narcissist, meaning, that's not a judgment. It probably has to do with their gender more than anything else, although men can be borderlines. but it means that they were not capable of creating that bulletproof firewall false personality. They go in and out of it. And when they're not, when they're in their vulnerable state, which is the state that we like to be with them during, that firewall isn't there. They're actually seeking very strongly to get your love and approval, and they do feel lots of deep, tender, loving feelings. They can be very empathic and very nurturing and healing. You've been there. It's the most amazing thing in the world. Narcissists also do that. So again, they're very similar. But then what ends up happening, and again, I appreciate people who've been in therapy. I was watching, and she's called Recovery Mom. She's a borderline that's been in therapy, and she was explaining exactly what I've been telling you guys, that actually she was looking back on past scenarios and explaining that when she was splitting, it was because she felt love. She was feeling love for her partner, and the fear, what the immediate response to feeling the vulnerable feeling of love is then to feel terror of being abandoned, which then creates the split. That's when they lose it. They lose their objective sense of reality, and they project onto you that you're trying to destroy them when you're not. And she said, it's because I was feeling love. I don't remember what her exact words were, but that was the gist of it. So, that's the really sad part about it, is that they come from this place of deep, tremendous love, which makes you want them. I mean, I can feel it myself as I'm explaining it. God, I want to find one of those. Except this is the mental illness part, that's only half of the, you got to take the whole thing. You can't have the good without the bad. And if you take the incredible loving part, you're going to get the hammer. You can't have one without the other. So that's, unless they've been in therapy for a long time, that's unavoidable. So she was saying, this person in the comment, some do not fit the description you're speaking of. Not all will be narcissistic. So again, that shows she doesn't even understand her own mental illness, because borderline personality disorder is a form of narcissism. In fact, it's so close to being NPD that when they are splitting, there is no difference. They are identical. When the narcissist rages and splits and the borderline splits, it's exactly the same. There's no difference. That's why for those of you who are borderlines, for those of us who've been with borderlines after the fact, and by the way, unfortunately, the only thing we're going to remember is the pain. We're not going to remember the other 70%, 80% of all the beautiful times. We're only going to remember the 20% of the time when, you're actually sticking, ice picks in our eyeballs. That's the only stuff we're going to remember, for an understandable reason. And so when borderlines are lashing out or breaking up or ghosting or whatever they're doing, it has the same effect on us as if you were an NPD. There's no difference. And so that's why partners, after the fact, they will then say how horrible, borderlines want to talk about how horrible the stigma is. And that's, you have to understand, like the stigma of, say, somebody being paraplegic. That's an undeserved stigma. Somebody who's paraplegic, they can't walk, they got to be in a wheelchair or whatever it is. The stigma of that would be like somebody going, oh yeah, that cripple over there, they can't do anything. There's a stigma. That's an undeserved stigma. But, when somebody is legitimately damaged, horrifically damaged, and complaining and or talking about the horrible damage they were on the other end of because of somebody's, the borderline's mental illness, that's not stigma. So when somebody says, like when I say, it's not going to work. If you date an untreated toxic borderline, it's not going to work. I don't make any judgments. If you listen, I will not say anything destructive or judgmental about them. I will talk about the actual results of the actions, of the symptoms, which are horrific. and you are going up against a psychopath who wants to destroy you. The whole point of the splitting is to destroy the partner. Whether or not that is your intention is irrelevant. The objective facts are you're destroying the other person for something that they haven't done. And you, without realizing it, you set them up by your love bombing to be more vulnerable than ever, so that when it comes out of nowhere, they don't understand it, and it's incredible. That's what's so destructive about it. It's not the same as a normal dysfunctional or just even a normal relationship issues. And that can be very confusing because, of course, there are going to be normal relationship issues with a borderline. So I can understand as a borderline feeling very misunderstood and feeling stigmatized, but you have to know the difference between undeserved stigma and somebody saying the truth of that person has a mental illness that is really destructive. There's a difference. But it's true, a lot of survivors are very angry and they are very judgmental and they do attack, but it's not coming out of nowhere. All right, so this person is saying that not all borderlines are going to be narcissistic, which means she doesn't understand what narcissism is and that she has a version of narcissism. And then she goes on to say one will be a cheater, one will be compulsive liar, drug addict, etc. But it's going to be different. Now she goes on to later say that she isn't a destructive borderline. So let's get to that. Again, we're going to show, my point is not to make fun of this person. My point is to show that when you're with a borderline that hasn't had enough self-awareness that's come from therapy, they don't really get it. And trying to, they're coming at you very reasonably. You want to be reasonable with them, but it's a waste of time, because if they can't see what's going on and what they're doing and they're not willing and they start to try and morph it into something that it's not, it's an absolute waste of time. And this is what the gaslighting is. This is what you're going through when you're trying to have a rational conversation with a borderline that you're dating to try and get it to work. They don't understand. Okay, so I basically respond to her and I say, first I ask for her to tell, is she a borderline or whatever. And then I go on to say that that borderlines, narcissists, and codependents are codependent. All three of them are codependent. So when you asked, am I talking about a codependent or a narcissist and a codependent are both codependent. Codependent means, again, don't get hung up on the word dependent. A codependent means that you were raised in a scenario where your love or your worth was transactional, meaning that you were not loved for who you were loved for what you did for somebody else. When your whole life starts that way, you are codependent, meaning every interaction that you have, especially romantic interaction, because that's the deepest connection to your unconscious, that's going to be transactional. So those of you why do you chase after borderlines and narcissists? Because borderlines and narcissists are incapable of having a relationship with you without making it transactional. So to you, that's what love is. That's why you chase after them. That's what makes you codependent. You don't like the idea of being dependent on somebody else? Great. You're not dependent on somebody else, but you interact with love interests based on transactions, not on actual value of who you are. So all borderlines, narcissists, and codependents are all codependents. And then, of course, as I said, but they're also all narcissists. Codependents may not have NPD, but they're very narcissistic. And it's all form. It's all one big ball. We're all together in the same ball here. But I say what makes the borderline unique isn't their codependence or their narcissism. It's that they split. That's what makes a borderline unique. And I said, it doesn't matter, how they do it. They're all different. But splitting, no matter what it is, no matter what form of splitting, whether it's raging and screaming and throwing ashtrays at your head, or whether it's very calmly telling you why they can never see you again, or ghosting you or not responding. It's all the same, and it all has the same effect. That's what borderlines need to know. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not saying you should choose to be yelling and screaming at somebody, but the end result of the splitting is always going to be as horrific, because the splitting is what makes it unique. If you don't split, you're not a borderline. You might be all screwed up in all kinds of areas. You might be impossible to deal with, but you're not a borderline. Borderlines split. That's the symptom. So that's what's important. That's what people are responding to. So to try and lump borderlines into everybody else, everybody's got problems, that's true. But to not acknowledge the horrifically damaging and very unique expression of pain and vulnerability through splitting, to not understand that and to not acknowledge that, that's going to cause problems. So I don't know that this person understands that. So she goes on to say, and I'll see if I can get through. She makes a huge response, which again, the theme of what she's about to say is, I'm not like them. People can date me. I'm safe. And then she goes on to gaslight me. So if you've been with a borderline and you know that feeling where like you're listening to them and part of you is saying, oh, it's okay, I can be with them. They're telling me I can be with them. And another part of you is going, why do I feel so devalued? Why do I feel like it's my fault? And why do I somehow feel more insecure now than before, even though we're about to go have sex? I'm going to show you part of what that is. So she says to me, thank you for your interesting response. As someone who deals with the type of borderline that I have, so she now admits she's a borderline, so now I know I'm talking to a borderline. The destruction I cause is to myself emotionally, but I don't show it. With my partner, I am emotionally mature, as he puts it, and have helped him grow a lot in life. My point was not to invalidate your personal experience. That's coming across like she's connecting with me, validating me, but she's about to invalidate it in half a second here. My point was not to invalidate your personal experience, but to let you know that it is your experience and many other people's, though I can offer another perspective. So if you're not listening for it, it's easy because I can read it. I'm not there looking. She's, I went and clicked on her. She's, of course, the worst kind of borderline for me because she's young and super sexy looking and attractive. And so I would just be, as she's, placating me while setting me up for the devaluation and not knowing that she's doing that. But because I can read it, I can see, here comes the gaslighting. So she's on the one hand saying, I'm not invalidating your experience, but it is your experience. She says, people with trauma will have splits. So she's not talking about borderlines. Now she's trying to lump herself in with everybody who has trauma. People with trauma will have splits, though in the right environment and relationship, these can be worked on as long as we are aware and willing. Well, that's the problem. If you have borderline personality disorder, you're not aware. Because if you were aware, you wouldn't have a mental illness that prevented you from knowing what was going on. See, again, here's the half-truth. It's true. Everybody splits all the time. Everybody in your navel center, you're constantly splitting between love and hate, good and bad. It's part of being a human. But it's that integration that happens as an infant. When you grow out of an infant into toddlerhood, you start to integrate. And you start to learn to tolerate the good and the bad, and you start to look at somebody and say, wow, that person's really wonderful, and there's a couple things about him I don't like. Or, wow, that person's really awful, but there are a couple of good things about him. The borderline doesn't have that ability because they're emotionally arrested at the infant stage where they're incapable. It's either one or the other. I'm either really happy mommy's breastfeeding me, or I'm really unhappy because I got to poop in my diaper and nobody's paying attention to me. And it's very extreme. They can't get past that. They're still stuck there. So she's trying to say that she splits, but she puts it inward and she takes the anger out on herself, because a split is homicidal rage. Borderlines, if you're honest, you'll know that that's what's going on. The rage is intense. There's no like off switch. You're either, it's one or the other. And so it is homicidal rage. So she's saying, I turn that homicidal rage inward, but with my partner, I am very mature. And if that's the case, you're not a borderline. So are you a borderline or not? If you are a borderline, then you are maybe, and every borderline is different, but that's what makes them borderline, is that they split. And I'm here to tell you that splitting is always destructive, extremely destructive to the other person, unless you're able to manage your symptoms. And turning the rage inward is not managing the symptoms. That's pushing it into your unconscious, which will make you passive aggressive and make you even more destructive in other ways to other people. So she's trying to make the argument that, oh yeah, I split, but I don't take it out on my partner. In fact, he tells me that I've helped him. So it means that she doesn't, if she is a borderline, it means she doesn't understand the damage she causes. And that doesn't, just because he has said whatever she says he said, which we only know her story of it, but even if that's true, that doesn't mean anything. Codependents will say whatever the hell they need to say to keep you from splitting on them. And if you split, when he says, no, actually, you're being really immature and hurtful, and if that makes you split and turn the anger inward and run away and close the door and, meditate for 3 hours, then he's not going to say that. He's going to say, no, you've been really helpful, and he's going to find ways to justify it if he's a codependent. He could be. So that doesn't mean anything just because you said that. How the relationship is perceived, she goes on to say. How the relationship is perceived and what elements make it feel safe. So again, she's going to focus on her feeling safe. If you're borderline, you can't trust that. That's the problem. That's the mental illness. There's going to be a time when your brain will tell you you're not safe when there's literally nothing that is unsafe about what's going on. You can't trust your own feelings. And that's the narcissism. The narcissism is my feeling is the world. And somebody who's not a narcissist goes, wow, I'm really having an intense feeling, but let me take a look. Is this accurate or not? That's the narcissism. She's going on to say how she deals with things and, what other people do. She's trying to make the argument that, she's trying to put it in the, all relationships go through this. Again, not understanding her, what she does, what she brings to the equation. So some of the things you have mentioned, she says to me, happen with regular relationships. That's true, except for the splitting. That doesn't happen with regular relationships. If you're a borderline and you think that everybody splits, that's not accurate. That is what makes you unique. That's the thing to focus on. There's all kinds of other things that you may or may not do. Maybe you're manipulative, maybe you're abusive, maybe you're people-pleasing, maybe you're a codependent, maybe you're reasonable. Those are all things that make you a unique individual. What makes you borderline is the fact that you split. So don't try and take splitting and say that happens in all relationships, because trust me, it doesn't. That's, for those of us who've been with different kinds of people, we can all nod in agreement. No, that's not normal. That's not what we experience. And that's what makes it so traumatic, is because we never see it coming. And neither do you if you're a borderline. She says, she also says, we are not compatible with everyone, but I disagree that only codependents are attracted. That has not been true in my case. I like to be very independent myself to remain healthy. I encourage this in my partner. So again, she's making the mistake that most people make, which is the word codependent means that somebody who's really dependent on you, they're clingy, and they're dependent on your opinion all the time, which ironically, if she's a borderline, she's extremely dependent on the idea of somebody not rejecting them, which is, of course, you're dependent on somebody's feelings. But if we take her at face value that she's very independent, an extremely codependent reaction is to isolate yourself. and not be dependent on other people because it stimulates the discomfort and the fear. So that doesn't mean anything. Again, we've got somebody who doesn't understand codependence, doesn't understand even what borderline personality disorder is. That's not what codependence means. So she's trying to tell me that she's dated people that aren't codependent. So she's saying, her argument is, you're wrong, Mike. I'm borderline, but I don't hurt people. And you're wrong. Everybody I've been with have not just been codependents because I won't put up with that kind of dependent behavior. But again, a codependent is somebody who only knows how to have a contractual relationship where your worth is based on what you do. If you're borderline and you don't want to be triggered and you make that part of the contract, that if you don't push my buttons and if you don't violate my boundaries, then we'll be okay. That's already a contractual relationship. And it's not about the other person. It's about what the other person either does or doesn't do for you. Let's not stop there, because codependents do the same thing, which makes it sad for them because they're desperately trying to create that transaction so that they can get you to act the way that they want, which is to be love bombing them all the time, and or letting them fix you and letting them love you. And when you don't do that, that's horrifically painful to the codependent, because then they have no value, they have no worth. If the love isn't based on you doing something for them, or them doing something for you, sorry. She's in denial about that. Let's see what else. She goes on to talk about this narcissist that she dated. Okay, so we don't need to get into that. Here's something she says that's interesting. She says, I would always be triggered in ways that were unhelpful, and he would become more controlling. So I was doing some research today, and I was watching a psychiatrist or a psychologist's video, and I was pulling whatever hair I didn't have out of my head. And this is the frustration for people who have been in destructive relationships with borderlines. If you go and watch that, the way they talk about borderline personality disorder, they talk about it like it's just this sort of thing. Some people have a little bit of anxiety, and some people have a little bit of this, and then some people have a little bit of borderline personality disorder. And they talk about it, and I don't know if they're doing that because as a therapist, they're trying to make the borderline patient feel comfortable and not feel stigmatized. I don't know what it is, but and they'll use words that I know that if I were borderline, I would latch onto and I would use it. And I hear them. I hear borderlines do this all the time. They'll talk about saying, when I'm triggered. And when you just go by the language of I'm triggered, it assumes that somebody did something to you. Somebody walks by and puts a cigarette out in your face, that's going to trigger me. You did it to me. Also, when she was talking about, and it's challenging to work with borderlines because, they'll love you, and then if you disappoint them, but even that language means that, and I've read when borderlines will say, and then when I get disappointed, it's very easy, even if you consciously know what it means on an unconscious level, language is important. It still has the assumption that somebody did something that made you feel that way. And I wish there were other ways, because in my experience with borderlines, the projection, the triggering, the disappointment is self-initiated and projected onto somebody else. So when somebody says, yeah, when somebody disappoints me and then I do this, it's like, yeah, but that's completely happening within you. But then ironically, they'll gaslight you for that when they actually do something objectively, irrationally destructive, and you point it out to them, they'll say, no, that's your projection. That's your issue. That's not coming from me. But when you try and say that, no, that's your projection, that's not coming from me, then you get your ass handed to you. Because of the intensity of their experiences. So to be the codependent, you're constantly forced to just never know what the truth is. And in order to keep the relationship, you have to take responsibility, and you convince yourself that you are responsible for something that you didn't do. And this, after a while, this starts taking on a life of its own. And this is PTSD. So if you've been with a borderline, you have suffered and are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. It's horrific. And it lasts for months and years. Sometimes it never goes away. You date a girl for 6 months or a year and you can be screwed up for the rest of your life because of the PTSD, because of the gaslighting. That happens. Okay, let's see what else. What else does she say that I found relevant? So, okay. So anyway, stuff I don't need to share here. Let's see. So she says, bottom line is, yes, some people with borderline can be dangerous to themselves, to others, but no, we all come with different pathological issues and comorbidities. So while this is true, she says about herself, someone like me is not dangerous in relationships any more than anyone else. So she's trying to say that she's a borderline, but she's no different than anybody else. She's completely safe to be with. First off, if she is a borderline and she thinks that, she does not know what's going on. She is not aware. And this is the thing. This is what makes it a mental illness. When a borderline is splitting and they are absolutely convinced that you did something to them and they don't have any awareness that it's coming from themselves, even though everybody else watching it would say, no, none of that happened. That's a mental illness. That means that they're not able to see objective reality. And if people with mental illnesses are the last ones to take a look at it. When I was watching this video and this guy was asking this therapist, so what if somebody thinks they might be splitting? And she said very calmly, well, the thing is that, borderlines aren't normally open to being aware of their splitting. Which is a kind way of saying, they have a mental illness. They're not capable of knowing when that happens. If you are aware, oh my gosh, I'm really having a strong reaction and I'm not thinking clearly right now, it means that you're not operating at that moment from a mental illness. The self-awareness of your feelings, your internal narcissistic experience is not jiving with objective reality, and you have the ability to see that. It means you don't have a mental illness. So for her to say that I'm a borderline, but I'm not dangerous, I split, but I only harm myself, it means she's completely clueless, and I would say this is the worst and most dangerous type of borderline to be with, because they're going to be the first to gaslight you. She's got now an agenda. Now, I understand she doesn't like what I'm saying. She's probably hearing me say in that video that she's responding to that don't date a borderline. Not only don't date them, but if you are dating them, get the hell out, block them on every possible level you can, which of course is the very thing that borderlines don't want. They don't want to be abandoned. So I'm not unaware of that. I totally have empathy and sympathy for her saying, don't tell people to abandon me. I'm really great to be with. I'm sure you are 70, 80% of the time. It's that 20% of the time when, according to you, you rage internally at yourself, but the rage is always at other people. Even if you're not aware of that, you're taking it out on everybody. Whether it's you go silent, you give the silent treatment, whether you disappear, whether you can't get out of bed for a week, whether you go, however it is that you respond when you split. If you're in a relationship, you're splitting at the other person, let's be honest. And just because you turn it around and think you're going to beat yourself up with that rage, it doesn't change anything. You're still taking it out on them. And it's okay with me that you don't see that, and I accept that maybe you don't see that. But trust me, we feel it. It's no different. In fact, my experience is that being with a quiet borderline is worse. Because a borderline that rages externally, I can see that. I can understand it. And knowing myself, I'm not like other codependents are different, but if a borderline raged at me, first time out, if one split of them raging on me would be enough, and I'm like, I'm out of here, and I wouldn't stay. I'd be gone. When you rage internally, it creates such guilt and confusion to the other party because they don't understand what they did. And in order to try and make the relationship work, the codependent will gaslight themselves. What did I do? How did I do that? How can I prevent that from ever happening again? She disappeared on me. She, whatever it is that she did. So I don't think this person has any idea what's going on, and this is, wanting to gaslight me. She very subtly tried to gaslight me by saying, I'm sorry that happened to you, that some borderline was mean to you, but I wouldn't do that. That's your experience. You can't put that on me, even though, of course, I don't know anything about her. I don't know her. Just because I talked about borderline, she took that personally. Let's see, what else? So she says, wanted you to know that we are not all evil, soulless, empty people. I don't think you are evil. I've never said that. I never said you're soulless. I do believe that you have the experience of being empty, if not consciously, definitely on an unconscious level, which is what's most important. So what you're trying to do is trying to change my opinion, thinking that I'm judging and stigmatizing you, which I'm not. Just because, again, I see somebody has 2 legs and they're trying to crawl around on the ground, I'm going to say, hey, you need to get a wheelchair, or you need to get some prosthetics or something. You're missing a couple of legs. That's not an attack. That's a fact. I'm looking at it. Borderlines have a mental disability. They split. And no matter, you're trying to wrestle with that doesn't change anything. Therapy is, in my understanding, the only way that somebody's going to be able to find ways to know how to handle it, and handle it in a way where it doesn't cause harm to your partner. But if you're not equipped with the ability, if he doesn't have a wheelchair, he's not going to be able to go anywhere. He's going to crawl around on 2 legs, and it doesn't matter if he says, stop looking at me, I can walk just like everybody else. It doesn't change anything. So let's see. Let's see if there's I think there's a last minute gaslight here. Let me see if I can find it. Some of us can and will be the most beautiful souls in the world. I believe you. That's not the issue. This is, again, your narcissistic experience of yourself, which is you're full of love, you're a beautiful person. I believe you. That doesn't change anything. It's not your actions it's not your essence that is destructive. It's the actions that you take. So trying to poo-poo the actions as they're not really there, and then say, but you can't say that about me, I'm a beautiful person. You can be this again, borderlines can't have, these 2 contrasting things, whereas I can see that you're a wonderful, beautiful person, and that you have this mental illness that causes you to do really horrifically destructive things. The healing will be when the borderline can do that, when they can love themselves in their limitation and not take it out on anybody else. Then, see, that's the thing. Borderlines, we don't care that you split. We don't care that you have that. We only care that you hurt us in ways that we don't deserve. If you could have that and experience that and not take it out on us, we would be there and love you through all of it. That's the sad, ironic part. Okay, let's see. She says, some of us can will be the most beautiful souls in the world. You may keep generating the same type of borderline over and over, she says to me. And I can't answer as to why that is, but that's only one face, and I'm here to break the stigma. You're creating the stigma by not having the ability to take responsibility for what you are doing. When you split internally, your inability to see the damage that it caused, your unwillingness to own it and to work through it and to whitewash it. That's where the stigma comes from. The stigma comes from people having been with borderlines that say, man, and they have no idea what they're doing. The stigma can come from that because if I believe you when you tell me that, and I happen to be the one that you're dating, and then we go out and date, and then you do something horrifically damaging and hurtful to me and either not remember it or not understand it or not take responsibility or turn around and say that it's my issue, then afterwards, if I don't have the ability to see underneath what's going on, then my only conclusion will be, oh my God, they just lie to you and manipulate you and destroy you. And then I go around saying, yeah, borderlines, they're these evil geniuses that go out and try and destroy you. And then you're going to go, oh my God, the stigma. There I am being stigmatized again. But the stigma comes from exactly this, whitewashing what you do, not taking responsibility and not understanding it. Not even having the ability to acknowledge it. And at the same time, I understand why that would be very difficult. Nobody would want to look at that. And that, I was listening to that same borderline woman, recovery mom, explaining that looking back on it, she was manipulative and she was gaslighting, but it wasn't because she was planning it out ahead of time, which is what I tell you guys. They're not planning it out. It's just that she split and responded in her, with her dysfunction, and she couldn't stop herself. And even after the fact, she knew she couldn't stop herself. And so in order to avoid blame, she wants to gaslight you so that you won't think bad of her. It's not that, haha, I'm gaslighting you. It's that I'm trying to avoid being, and the way she described it is, I didn't want him to leave me. So I told him it was his fault, hoping that he would then not, project that onto her, which of course creates the exact thing that she's trying to avoid. If she's able to say, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right, I shouldn't have done that, you didn't deserve that, which again is very difficult to do if you have been programmed to feel worthless, then you're going to try and avoid blame everywhere you go. So the gaslighting is their strategy to avoid being blamed and discarded. But if they attack you in their splitting and then they realize after the fact what they've done, they try and catch themselves. They're afraid you're going to leave them if you see that this is something they can't help it. They're afraid if you can see that they can't help what they just did. So then they're going to try and figure out a way to avoid blame so that you'll keep them around. So they blame you for it. And then that's the narcissism. The narcissism means the inability to be outside of yourself and to be in somebody else's skin. The inability to understand how horrifically damaging and devaluing that is. Because to value somebody is when they have a legitimate feeling, you value that. You reflect that back and you say, you're right. And when I'm with a partner and, like everybody else, I make mistakes and I have, and when it comes to my attention and when I'm able to see it, I am the first one to say, you are absolutely right. I did this, this, and this. You didn't deserve that. And then if they want to know, I'll explain what my thinking was, my feelings were. But the first thing I do is I acknowledge their feeling and their reality that, hey, what I just did, you did not deserve. And I am so sorry that you went through that. And then they might want to know, well, tell me why you did that. And then I can tell them what my pain or weirdness was. And then they can take care of me if that's what they want. When the borderline doesn't believe that they have value, is constantly trying to avoid being blamed, shamed, and abandoned, they're gaslighting you so that you won't see that in them and that you won't leave them. Their plan wasn't to some will want to do this, of course, but and a lot of them, their plan isn't to shame you and make you feel like crap, which of course is what happens. They're hoping in their narcissistic fantasy, they're hoping that you're going to go, oh, it was my fault? Oh, okay. It wasn't you. You didn't do it. You still love me. That's what they're hoping you're going to do. But what happens is you go, I don't understand how I don't. Okay. And then it just creates this craziness inside of you. And you have to gaslight yourself in order to stay in the relationship. And that's the thing. You never know. You never know when they're going to go off. what slightest little trigger that is going to happen inside of them, God forbid you actually do something, which of course you will at some point. But the majority of the time in my experience with me, I mean, it was all happening inside of her. In fact, it would happen because I did the right thing. I would do something that would make her feel so loved, and she would laud me and praise me for how wonderful and how loving I am. And then, if I happen to drive home, she has enough time by herself, her brain would get to her and talk her out of it. And the next thing I know, I would be horrifically punished for the very thing that was just the most wonderful thing that had ever been done just hours earlier. And then she would gaslight me. She'd come back and hoover me and gaslight me and say that it was my fear. I triggered her because I was afraid of intimacy. And, and I'd go, okay, that must have been it. I think you're right. She was brilliant at pulling my feelings out. And, their strategy is to keep you around so that you'll love them. That's their conscious strategy. Their unconscious strategy is to destroy you. All right. So I don't know if there's any questions. It's the middle of the night. I just wanted to make this video. I've been thinking about it. I don't see any questions here. Hassan says, I traveled away from my BPD, and within 4 days after we broke up, there is no hope in our relationship, but she keeps hoovering. It's hard to do the complete no contact. It is hard. It's extremely hard. When I did it, it was the most difficult thing I can remember doing. Among the most difficult things I've ever done. And the only reason I was able to do it and make that decision was because I've been in therapy for over 20 plus years, and I've been in 12-step recovery for almost 40 years. So you're absolutely right, but it doesn't change anything. You have to do it. You can't, there's no hope. I'll say it again. With an untreated, undiagnosed, and or toxic borderline, whenever they hoover you, the hope is it's going to get better this time. This time it'll get better. This time I'll figure out a way. They'll even tell you that. They want that too. They want this time to be the time when I finally don't ever have to split, and it'll all be okay now. And it gets worse every single time. She's going to work to get you closer and more vulnerable. She will then respond with even more hatred towards you when she splits, because the more intimate you are with her, the more intense her reaction will be against the intimacy. And until you can understand that, there's going to be a huge part of you that's going to try and keep talking you into staying. It'll be better. But it never gets better. Never. So if you can get out, get out. And that's all you have to do is just get out. Go no contact. I think I would send one sentence text saying you should look into borderline personality disorder, and then I would break off all contact with her. That is the kindest thing you can do. The other thing to think about is every time you go back, you are doing her harm. So if you honestly believe that you love her, then the worst thing you can do for her is go back with her, because you're her drug. She won't get help as long as you let her hoover you back. All of me telling you that isn't going to do it. So that's why those 3 things. You can do those things. If you want to go back with her, do those 3 things. Therapy, CODA.org. Go to coda.org and get a sponsor. If you're not talking to somebody, if you don't have help, and you won't have anybody to call up when you go, oh my God, she's at the door and I want to have sex with her right now. If you don't do those 3 things, Hassan, it's very hard for me to have sympathy for you. Those 3 things are all free. You can find free therapy online. Even if you can't, Coda is free. Daily meditation is free. Do that no matter what's going on. Hassan says, I'm codependent and PTSD. I feel all of this panic attack and stress and low self-esteem after 1.5 years in this stormy relationship. Is there any way to heal without visiting doctors? I don't know what you mean by doctors. You can't heal alone. And why do you not want to visit doctors? What's wrong with you? I mean, think about it. Why do you not want to go see a doctor? If you had this pustule and there was worms coming out and pus on your shoulder, I mean, what would you do if somebody walked in and their face was all green and they were dying and they said, yeah, I've got this problem, but I don't want to see a doctor? You would say, what the hell is your problem? Get to the emergency room right now. Nah, if I can do it without seeing doctors, I mean, do you have some aspirin? So you're acting insane. The thought that you don't want to see a doctor is an insane thing to do. But as I've said, you can see a therapist. Go to coda.org now. Get off this video right now. Type in coda.org into your computer and look for the next live Zoom meeting and go to that and raise your hand and say, I'm brand new and I need a sponsor to work through the 12 steps. I'm having a really hard time getting out of an extremely destructive codependent relationship. If you don't do that, I can't help you. There's a very little chance you'll be able to get through this. Those are just the facts. It's not going to feel better. If you're wanting me to give you a pill to make it feel better so that you'll then feel comfortable to go do it, I can't do that because it's not possible. There isn't anybody who's recovered from this that didn't not want to go. You think you're the first person that didn't want to go and didn't want to get help? No, every single person. That's what makes it insane. I mean, codependency isn't a personality disorder, but it acts exactly like one. You're just as helpless as the borderline. You're just as helpless as the drug addict. D. Gordon, my wife constantly threatens divorce. Why is that? When I financially say, finically, I don't know what that means. When I finically say, okay, she tries to work it out. It's still blaming me. How do I react? How do I handle it? I do love her. So D. Gordon, I don't know what you're telling me. Are you telling me that you're married to a borderline? Get out. It's not going to work. If what you're telling me is that you are dating an untreated and or undiagnosed and or toxic borderline, there's nothing that you can do. You can't handle it. I know that you love her. It's probably going to be horrifically painful, but you're in love with somebody who is mentally ill and is constitutionally incapable of having a relationship. That is the nature of the mental illness that she has. So that's not what I do here. I'm not here to try and help you work through things with a borderline. You're 23 years old and you have 4 kids? What the fuck? How did that happen? You didn't just have 1 kid with a borderline, you had 4 kids with a borderline. So you're extremely codependent. All right, so get ready because I'm going to be really straight with you, probably more straight than anybody else will. Your 4 kids are in very real danger of becoming borderlines or narcissists or antisocial personality disorder, and definitely codependent. The fastest way to make somebody a borderline is to have a borderline mother. Fastest way to make somebody a narcissist is to have a borderline mother. You chose to have 4 children with an extremely destructive person. You knew that long before kid number 4. You knew it long before kid number 1. So I'm not blaming you for it, but that is the fact. So you are karmically responsible for those kids' lives. My suggestion to you, if what you are telling me is that you are married to an undiagnosed, untreated, and or toxic borderline, my advice to you is to get a lawyer now and get a therapist now and go to CODA as well and find out what your rights are. Find out what you can do to get custody of those 4 kids and get them the hell away from their very destructive, abusive, unfortunately, mother who has a mental illness, unfortunately. So this isn't about her being a bad person. This is about her being mentally ill and potentially causing somebody, I mean, it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed. You got 3 years to get it right. And that's when all the damage happens. So I know that it's the worst thing. I know that it would cause you, I can't even imagine the amount of stress and fear and pain and confusion and guilt you must be feeling. But you have 4 kids that you chose to have with her, who are depending on you to save their lives. So get up off your ass, go to a therapist right now, and go get a lawyer right now, and start working to get out of that relationship and get those kids. If it was just you, I would be, harsh with you and direct, but it's different. It's just your life. You're responsible for those 4 kids. So you don't have the luxury to sit there and feel sorry for yourself and I feel guilty and I don't want to leave. Too bad. You chose to have 4 kids with a very sick, destructive person. If what you say is true, that's why you need to see a therapist and a lawyer. So go do that. What else? D. Gordon. Also, we have had many counselors and she fires them. So what? What do you want? I mean, didn't we just already conclude that? Oh, you just retracted it. Didn't we already conclude that she has a mental illness? So what? That's borderlines. She's not going to get fixed just because you went to a counselor. She has to want to get better. It's just like an alcoholic or a drug addict. Until they want to get better, there's nothing anybody can do or say. That's why you got to get the hell out. Ilan Nuaz, I am 10 months from my discard and about 9 months of no contact. I can vouch that going no contact is the single most important thing you can do to recover. Well, I wouldn't say the single most. Okay, yeah, I'll agree with you. It's the single most important thing, but it has to be followed up with the other things. It's not the only thing, and by itself it won't prevent being hoovered and it won't prevent finding another one. So the first thing you do is you go no contact, so it's in that very first thing. You can call your therapist and you can go to CODA and go no contact, all within the same week or whatever it is. But it's not the only thing. You got to do the other stuff. In my experience, you got to do all 3 things, which is what I talk about on the join button. But congratulations, my friend. It's equivalent to a drug addiction, and breaking the chemical dependency is paramount to recovery. I agree. Anonymissimus. So that means extremely anonymous in Latin. Anonymissimus. How can you be more anonymous than just anonymous? Anonymissimus says, my BPD has moved on quickly after discarding me without a valid reason. That's ironic because BPD discard assumes that there isn't a valid reason. That's what BPDs do. But then, I understand. You're aware. You didn't do anything. You didn't deserve it. I believe you. It turns out she was cheating on me the whole time. It affected me physically, mentally, and spiritually. And what did you do to heal yourself? Anything? I have to do those 3 things continuously. And let me just be clear about where all this join button here is. The join button on this channel is member-only videos where I share with you what I did to heal from that relationship. And this is the reason why I keep doing this channel. It's not just to point fingers at borderlines and to say break up with them and go no contact. That's not the reason. Because as I said, that's not a solution. It's not going to fix the problem. What happened with me is that I was so damaged beyond recognition from the gaslighting, from the devaluation. The devaluing is abuse. It's horrific abuse. It's the worst kind of abuse I can imagine. And that the damage from that abuse does not go away on its own. And so in order to be completely healed from that relationship, I had to do those three things. And so that's what I teach you how to do when you click that join button. And so, it's great that, we can all sit there and hold hands and support each other in the damage and the pain that happens when you discard. But the question is, do you want to be completely healed? I have zero pain surrounding the relationship. I have zero anger. I have zero loss. In fact, I don't even have any of that, romanticizing it. I don't think back on the good times and wish I could have that. None of that. And I am not angry with her. I'm not seeking justice. The niche that I think my channel offers, which I don't know if there's a lot out there. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 out there that do this kind of thing. There's doctors who talk about borderline personality disorder, which is helpful for borderlines, and they do it in this, detached way without any guilt or, whatever. And then there are no shortage of these super empath channels where people make these videos about, the empath destroys the narcissist, and the one that 7 things that you do and how to destroy the narcissist and how, and they go off about how, they're out for justice, that an empath, ironically, is out for justice. And that, we destroy the narcissist and walk over their corpse. And so that's what happens with somebody who's been in one of these cluster B relationships and hasn't gotten help. You end up like that. You end up having to go watch some super empath, super Heyoka video channel in order to get riled up in your rage and your anger and your resentment and your need for justice. And I'm on the one hand, telling people, you have been through hell. You've been with a borderline. You have gone through horrific abuse. And nobody's talking about it because it's not PC. If you start talking about, how horrific the abuse is, then people start labeling you as a stigmatizer, which of course I'm not. And then nobody has even the awareness of knowing what to do to heal. They don't even know that they need to go get help. They don't even know what got them in the relationship to begin with. That cognitive dissonance and that pain and that confusion and the devaluation doesn't go away just because you got out of the relationship. It's a form of PTSD. Like when people come home from the war and they have PTSD, they need therapy to fix that. I was watching a video of a guy who'd been blown up twice, and he had these tics, and he's constantly in this, reliving it in his body. It's still stuck in his body. I felt horrible for him. And while that's not at all the same thing, the similarity of the complex PTSD that you go through, if you've been with somebody said for 1.5 years, some people have been with their borderlines for 10, 20, 30 years. That's horrific. If you're a borderline and you're watching this, I'm not doing this to make you feel guilty. In fact, that's not my intention. In fact, I'll do everything in my power to prevent you from feeling that. But that's what's, it's a mental illness. You don't have to feel guilty for the fact that you have something that happened to you that you had no control over. And that's what I'm saying. You guys don't have any control over this. That's why it's so important for everybody to get help. But the same is true for the codependent. Codependent didn't just, leisurely walk into a landmine. This was a long time coming. There had been things and situations in your life, probably codependent situations, that drew you to that. You learned how to have transactional love, which means nobody loves you for who you are, but what you do. You don't even know that because you've never known anything else. So when you meet a borderline, you unconsciously just, you go right to them, because on an unconscious level, you know that you're going to have to be the fixer. You know that you're not going to be loved for who you are, because if somebody loved you for who you are, it would scare the crap out of you because you've never experienced it. And or, like me, I did grow up in a codependent home, and I had a mom that had at the very least borderline tendencies. I'm pretty sure that my grandmother had BPD, and I had an alcoholic father, and I went through 40 years of 12-step and 20 years of therapy, so I was doing pretty good. And then I met the love of my life, and she passed away, and that set me up. So that triggered my latent codependency, and borderline came into my sights and targeted me, and I couldn't resist it. But you have to know what it is that got you there, so that you don't have to point fingers, because that doesn't help anybody. You have to take full responsibility. And the borderline has to also take full responsibility. Okay, let's see what else. Extremely Anonymous says, she discarded me because during the pandemic I cannot go to her house to save her from her issues like Superman. When I caught her cheating, she screamed and punched the mirror for self-harm. So, Anonymous, have you done those things? Therapy, 12 steps? The reason is meaningless. She discarded you because she has a mental illness. Whatever reason she says she discarded you is totally arbitrary. It would have been if there wasn't a pandemic. She would have discarded you because there wasn't a pandemic. If there was a pandemic, then you would have been here with me all the time, and we would have never left the bedroom. It doesn't matter. So this is the craziness part. Doesn't mean anything. Whatever she says the reason was is completely nonsense. And trying to figure that out, and trying to figure out what you did, and it doesn't mean anything. She was going to do that anyway. She was going to cheat on you anyway. That's how she handled her inability to tolerate the intimacy that you were giving to her. She couldn't tolerate it. She didn't cheat on you because you did something wrong. She cheated on you because you did something right. And of course, when you caught her cheating, she felt guilty. She screamed and, did whatever the hell she could to try and get you to take care of her. So she punched the mirror so that she cut her hand so that you'd go and take care of her. She's doing the best she can. She doesn't want to lose you. She didn't cheat on you because she was thinking to herself, how can I hurt this guy? She was cheating on you because she just couldn't tolerate whatever feelings she was having, and she needed something to distract her. And then she discarded you. She discarded you for the same reason. The thing that you may not realize is that your relationship was completely projection for both of you. It wasn't real. Whatever love you think you had wasn't real love. Whatever love she thought she had was not real love. It was this is why when I talk about my borderline ex, if you were to talk to me when I was first with her, I would have told you she was the next soulmate of my life. And and I look back on the relationship now, and even all the times that were us, the most beautiful, I look back on it and I go, oh, that was all empty. Not without pain, and I'm not pointing fingers. It was empty on my part. I was stimulated in my codependence. You chose her because of your codependence. You didn't really love her. I know that doesn't take away the intensity of your feeling. Not trying to diminish that. But whatever it is you think happened, it didn't happen. It wasn't because of this or that. Because she has a mental illness and you're a codependent. That's why it happened. Ilan Nguyen says, one of the most profound realizations I had is understanding the difference between transactional love and reciprocal love. Well, reciprocal is another word for transactional. So, I'm mincing words with you here. And the truth is that every relationship after infancy, after your mother, is transactional. So even when you get married, and it's a healthy relationship, it's still transactional. It's never going to replicate the mother-infant relationship. That will never be replicated. What's supposed to happen in the mother-infant relationship is the mother loves the infant simply because the infant exists. And the mother wants to, if she's healthy, she looks to see what is unique about this little baby. When the baby is crying, the mother wants to know what's happening so I can fix that because I know something's wrong. The borderline, I heard somebody shared something with me that was horrible, made me fucking want to tear up and cry. Said it was a borderline. I said the fastest way to create a borderline is to have a borderline for a mother. And the borderline, she said, yeah, either her or her mother, I forget who, used to remember when the infant was crying, she had to go sit in her car. She couldn't tolerate it. Creates a borderline. Because that's the exact opposite. What the mom wants to do is go, oh my God, my baby is crying. What is the specific thing that is going on with my child? And once you get through that, then you learn to integrate. Then you learn how to be disappointed and how to integrate that and not, split. So after that, every relationship is transactional. You go to school, you get grades, but there is a difference between, even if it's a transactional love relationship, you're still being loved and being treated as though you have value in and of yourself. And the borderline will never give you that feeling. They can't, because they don't have it within themselves. And they can't tolerate it when it's given to them. And codependents can't tolerate it either. That's why they chase after borderlines and narcissists. What else? SC. How can BPDs be so oblivious to the damage they cause? Listen to me very carefully. They have a mental illness. Should I repeat myself? The question is, how can you be so oblivious to that fact? How can you be so oblivious to the fact that the person that you're with is incapable of giving you what you want? How can you be so oblivious to the fact that you keep chasing after something that can never work? How is it that when the bear trap snaps onto your ankle and you pull it off and reset it, what is it that goes on in your brain that says, I can step in that bear trap again and I'm not going to get my ankle split in half? That's the real question. How can you be so oblivious to the fact that they're not going to stop doing what they're doing? Now, I know the answer to that question. I'm not doing this to make you feel stupid. But that's really the issue. You're the one responsible. You're the one that's oblivious. They have a mental illness. They can't help it. They're oblivious because they have a mental illness. They literally leave a trail of destruction to everyone and anyone who is unfortunate enough to cross paths with them. Surely they must know. Nope. The fact that you say that, here's what that tells me. You still want your borderline to love you, which really means you still want your mom to love you. Your mom didn't love you. Your mom did not love you for who you were. And you replicated that by chasing after a borderline. They discarded you. I'm assuming you're out of the relationship. And now you can't figure out why nobody loves you, why you aren't loved. And you only know how to seek after love by chasing after a borderline because it replicates your mom. And then I can ask your question, how can you be so oblivious to the fact that you have this damage within you that forces you to seek out an abusive person who's incapable of delivering on the promise of intimacy? Because that's what being with a borderline is. The most horrific thing about being with a borderline isn't that they split, which is horrible. It's the promise. The promise that just around the corner they're going to finally love you for who you are and they'll stop hurting you. And that's what you're looking for. And if I'm assuming you're not doing the 3 things I tell you to do. Go get a therapist. You can do it. Just type in free online therapy. Go to coda.org. That's free. Go to a Zoom meeting. Raise your little hand and say, I'm brand new and I need a sponsor to walk me through the 12 steps. If you don't do those 3 things, you're going to keep asking that question. You're not going to see how you sought it out. So you can do that. You can listen to what I'm saying. I completely understand where you're coming from. I completely, totally relate and empathize. And I'm no longer there. Do you want what I have? You got to do what I do. Or you can go and watch the super empath channels, and you guys can ask that question to each other. And then you can say, you know, I mean, I love watching it because they'll talk about the snake, and they'll talk about, you know, that they're these evil people and they're the wolf, and the wolf is out to destroy. I mean, they can't even begin to have the tiniest bit of empathy for the fact that these are really damaged people that have mental illnesses that can't help themselves. Never once have I heard them say that. They have to see the borderline as this evil wolf or this evil snake. And they do act that way, but you keep chasing after them. After the fact, you still can't figure out why they did it to you. You're not seeing your narcissism. You're making this question about you. How could they do this to me? Could they surely must know, or just don't care. They've got a mental illness. Is that something you can accept? If you can accept that, then you realize it's time to stop feeling sorry for yourself, because it's not accomplishing anything. Not that you don't deserve to mourn over the pain of the loss. You deserve to cry and mourn for the fact that somebody didn't see you. Somebody did not see your worth and your value and did not appreciate all of the love that you poured onto them. That's very sad. But it's time to stop obsessing over that, because it's not going to accomplish anything for you. Get real understanding. Get real love. Therapy, Coda. Those are the two places. Coda especially. 12 steps. Without it, you're going to ask this question for the rest of your life. It'll never stop. So next time I see you, SC, I want you to tell me how you talk to your therapist and you're now working the 12 steps. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for me to have sympathy for you, because you've got the illness and that's the cure. You need a triple antibiotic, and then you can start to heal. And if you don't do that, then there's nothing anybody can say. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe you're working your ass off. So you're new to the channel. Okay, let's see. Gabriella says, once you understand they are incapable of giving you what you want, you are ready for therapy. That's what I'm trying to do. I agree. I'm trying to pound this into your head so that you'll go get help. And my goal is so that you can be free and happy and stop watching the channel. My goal, there's never going to be, there's never going to stop being victims of this, kind of horrific, both borderlines, and there's always going to be partners for borderlines. But yeah, it would be nice to say, yep, everybody's healed now, and then I could just stop making videos. SC, I'm new to this channel, and no, I discarded him. So are you a borderline? No, you discarded your borderline, I'm assuming. You were dating a borderline and you discarded him. I wouldn't call that a discard. A discard has the assumption of somebody has no value. So when you dump somebody for no reason. And it means that, that you're devaluing somebody. So that's why we use the word discard with narcissists and borderlines, because that's what they do. They don't leave you because you did something wrong. They leave you because you loved them, and they're completely discarding and devaluing the tremendous value you're giving to them. If you're with a borderline and you leave them, even if it's abruptly, it's not a discard. It's an escape. So the borderlines are discarding you, but you're escaping the abuse. Now, that's what they think they're doing, ironically, but that's not. So I wouldn't say that you discarded them. I said you escaped. That's what I would say. 3 years free, but yes, you are right about my mom. She was a narcissist, so I understand the relation. Okay. All right, that's it. Nothing else. I got to go do my meditation now before I go to bed. In fact, I'm way, way behind schedule here. So I got to go do something. Anyway, so that's it. If you want to gain the healing that I've gone, click the join button. If you want to, you can check out all the other links up there. I won't get into it, but all that stuff is also stuff that what I do in my other channel, which is, again, the same goal is to help people be completely self-empowered. And Onesimus says, she said she will never love me way it was before. It's not real. The love is not real. I believe you, sir. Thank you. Okay. All right. All right. So good. We're all in agreement. All right. That's it, guys. Thanks a lot. I'll see you when I see you.